everyone, and welcome to Digital Hollywood's podcasting panel. Today, we're going to talk about programming, development, content, business, all things podcasting. By 2023, this industry is expected to be a $2 billion industry, according to the IAB, with now 80 million Americans listening to podcasts every week. So it's a growing business, and I'm so delighted to bring together four people who really have helped make that growth happen. Our panelists today are going to dig in on a variety of topics. I know I'm excited to hear what they have to say, and I hope you will be too. My name is Kathy Doyle. I'm the Vice President of Podcasts at Macmillan Publishers in New York, where we have been podcasting continuously for over a decade. In fact, our Grammar Girl podcast, the first one to join our network, is celebrating 15 years in July. So we've been at this for quite a while. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our panelists to have each of them introduce themselves, and then we will dig in for what it promises to be a very lively conversation. Thanks to Victor Harwood and Digital Hollywood for bringing us together today. So Jen Sargent, why don't you kick us off?
Great, thanks, Kathy. Hi, everyone. I'm Jen Sargent. I'm the CEO of Wondery. In case you're not familiar with us, we're a leading podcast publisher known for our character-driven storytelling and hits such as Dr. Death, Business Wars, Even the Rich, The Apology Line. We really strive to put our listeners in the middle of the story and immerse them in what's going on. We've had a lot of success the past few years with 33 #1 hits on Apple, and we've had 19 of our shows optioned for television. 4 of those are in production right now, and the first one of those that'll be coming out this year is Dr. Death. So we have really 2 parts of our business. We have our originals business, where it's content that Wondery is creating ourselves and launching. And then we have the partner side of our business, where we work with third parties who create great content, and we help them market, monetize, and distribute their podcasts.
Awesome, can't wait for that. Jenna, how about you?
Hey, I'm Jenna Weiss-Berman. I am a co-founder of Pineapple Street Studios. We make a lot of shows, Missing Richard Simmons, Wind of Change, Still Processing. We made a show with Ronan Farrow this year based on his Catch and Kill book. So we do a lot of fun stuff. We also work with brands on podcasts. We do most of the shows that Netflix does, most of the shows that HBO does, work with Nike, all sorts of exciting, fun brands, and kind of help them turn their podcast ideas into reality. And we've been around for about 5 years. Before that, I was head of audio at BuzzFeed, started a podcast department there. And before that, I spent about a decade in public radio as a producer on shows like The Moth and StoryCorps and Hidden Brain and lots of other things. So it's a fun time in podcasting. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome, thanks. Josh.
Yes, hi, I'm Josh Lindgren. I am the head of the podcast department at the Creative Artist Agency, CAA. I have represented podcasters for over 7 years now, since 2014. Work with a range of really excellent clients, from Stuff You Should Know to Salt Audio, Qcode Media, Gideon Media, Maximum Fun, Lemonada Media. Jen referenced Dr. Death. I work with Laura Beal, the correspondent and creator of that show. Have also had the privilege of working on deals for Hollywood talent like Jonathan Glickman's Glickmania, Avery DuVernay's partnership with Spotify, Mick Jagger's Rainy Day podcast deal with Warner Brothers, Jordan Peele's deal with Spotify, Jamie Lee Curtis's multiple deals, Paul Feig's podcasting operation as well. So wide range of different types of things that I've had the opportunity to work in. And I'm excited to be with everyone here today to chat about my favorite thing in the world, podcasts.
Amazing, glad to have you here. And last but not least, in what I believe is his very first podcast panelist, Steve Wilson, sorry.
Hi there, wonderful to be with everyone. Yes, I'm Steve Wilson, excited to be with you guys. I'm Chief Strategy Officer at Qcode Media, just joined them in December. Qcode is a 2-year-old podcast company specializing in scripted fiction podcasts. We take actors you love, amazing stories, and we produce the hell out of them. We do really high-end sound design. We've partnered with Dolby and are mixing our shows in Atmos, and really take a lot of pride in the original scripted stories we make. Some of our shows include Blackout with Rami Malek, Dirty Diana with Demi Moore, a great kids show with Matthew McConaughey called Hank the Cowdog, and many others. We have 12 shows released now and are releasing around 15 later this year. We also are very focused on derivatives and podcasts as well, and many of our shows have been picked up for adaptation at a variety of places, including Amazon on the TV side. Prior to joining Qcode, I spent a long career at Apple, 15 years. I worked in content and editorial marketing on Apple Podcast, and excited to go from the platform side of the podcast business to the content side. Again, excited to be here with everyone today.
Thanks, Steve. We're so glad to have you here and really looking forward to season 2 of Blackout, which I think is coming like pretty much any day now, right? Pretty soon.
Yes, very soon.
Good. Okay, so we're going to talk about the derivative piece, but for starters, I thought we would dig in at the basics. We have a lot of creators here today, a lot of producers listening in. Josh, I want to start with you. We all get pitched pretty much every day. You know, you get those proposals, those decks, those emails. What is it about a pitch, especially now that we have so many podcasts and just about every genre has, you know, multiple shows in their category? What is it about a pitch or a proposal that really makes you excited, that, you know, makes you give something the green light or at least escalate it to that point? And what kinds of things do you also tell creators that they should avoid when they're embarking on this process?
Yeah, great question. As a person who professionally makes pitches and also a person who, like everyone on this call, receives pitches constantly, I have a lot of thoughts. But, you know, there's a few big picture things. I mean, one is that no matter how good your pitch is, the content has to be good, right? The goal of your pitch is just to get someone to take whatever the very next step is, right? And so if you have a podcast and you want someone to check it out, the goal of the pitch that you're sending out is just to get someone to listen, and then the thing has to be so good that they stick around, right? There needs to be really good content at the basis of it. No matter how incredible you are at pitching, if they listen to the thing and they're not into it, that's kind of the end of it, right? To that end, I think that there are varying degrees of success you might have in getting someone to take that first step, whether it's listening to your show, taking a meeting with you, whatever. You know, a few things that I feel like really shine through in this space, now that there's 2 million plus podcasts in the English language on these various platforms, you need originality. You know, you need a pitch that's going to break through a little bit and be like, oh, that's interesting. I haven't heard that before. I want to see what that's all about. You know, as opposed to, well, it's another show that's like X, Y, and Z, but ours is better. You know, maybe it is, right? But we might be less likely to, you know, click through or to take that meeting or whatever if we feel like we've heard it a million times. So, you know, really trying to find what your angle is for what makes your show unique, and thinking from the perspective of the person accepting your pitch or looking at your pitch. What are they looking for, right? What's the thing that's going to motivate and excite them? And then, you know, think through all of those things that's going to motivate them, and then cross out like 90% of them and write like a very brief email, right? If you put together an email that has 1,000 press links and everything that's cool about your show and everything that's exciting about what you want to do, you know, someone's eyes are probably, maybe they're going to read the entire thing, but maybe their eyes are going to sort of glaze over it, and they're going to pick out certain things that might not be the things that you would have picked for them to pay attention to. So I say, just give them the things they should pay attention to. What are the top 2, maybe 3 things that they should know about your project to get you to that next step? And you have to, you know, really be ready to kill your darlings and get in there and focus on the things that are most important. Once you get them on the phone, you can tell them all about, you know, what's so great, the other things you wanted to hit about your show. Once you get them to listen to your show, they're going to hear how great it is. But step 1, if you're cold emailing someone or you're making a call or something, you just need to get right to those salient points that are going to grab their interest and that they're going to remember, right? Because again, you put 1,000 things on an email, they might remember none of it, or they might remember the thing that you least cared about them remembering. So like brevity is the soul of a great pitch, to slightly alter a famous quote.
Love it. Who else? Anything to add, Jenna?
Sure. I'll just add, I mean, I think, you know, Josh is talking about something really important, that you don't want to necessarily pitch a show that's been done a million times before. Like, it's good to do something that is new. And I think the thing that we think about a lot is bringing in new audiences to podcasting. So yes, it's growing very rapidly. We're all very excited about it. 80 million Americans is still less, if I'm doing my math right, it's still less than a quarter of the people who live in this country. To put into perspective, 96% of Americans listen to radio regularly. So I think we still have a long way to go, and we have a long way to go with who the audiences are and, who content is being made for. So for us, we're always looking for new audiences, whether that's a different age demographic, or, people of color, children of immigrants, things that can be really specific. Children, there are finally some good kids shows, but there could be a lot more. So I think for us, we're really looking at pitches where you can tell that somebody has an audience in mind, and that maybe that's a new audience to podcasting. I think it's good for all of us if we can expand who's listening to these things.
Great.
I'll add something to that too. I mean, just to build on what Jenna said, in addition to expanding audiences, which is a goal of ours as well, we usually ask why. Like, why is a current podcast listener going to listen to this show? And, the average weekly podcast listener listens to about 5 podcasts a week. So you're introducing this show, one of those 5 podcasts are going to get bumped off their list. Why are you going to dislodge, whatever it is they're listening to, Joe Rogan or The Daily, or, and we like creators to be able to articulate that why of what it means for the listener. And then that usually gets us very excited.
Great. How about you, Steve?
Yeah, I mean, I love so many of the points that have been made here across the board. And I think, as it relates to some of what we do at Qcode around scripted fiction, fiction is one of the smallest categories today. So much of podcasts that are out there are nonfiction. They offer great entertainment, as well as, opportunity to learn and be educated. But that balance between fiction and nonfiction is a little bit, in podcasts, is a little bit weighted different than much of the media that we consume. In TV and film or in books, a lot of what we consume is fiction, but there's less of that in podcasts. And so that's just something that has struck me and us as a little bit odd. I think one of the things that we are looking for, and I think all of you guys have said this, but it's, a little bit of creative risk. There are a lot of scripted fiction podcasts that are in, what they call genre, sci-fi, horror, fantasy, which are great genres for fiction, but increasingly, we're really branching out into other genres, as Jenna said, too, things that are going to reach kids and families that people can listen to together in the car. But also, we have a female erotica based podcast, and we have a action comedy in the spirit of a great 80s movie. So we are looking for, that understanding of where the creative risk lies in a project that might take fiction to a more mainstream level.
Awesome. The only thing I'd add to that too is just be clear about your ask, right? Are you asking for production resources? Are you asking for a partner because you want to be on that network? And if so, why? Just be really clear about what your ask is. Those are great insights. Thanks, guys. Let's talk a little bit about derivatives. It kind of leads right into that, right? Jenna, you mentioned on our prep call that sometimes you guys are actually looking to exploit into film and TV. It's actually part of the vetting process. How important is that to you?
Yeah, it's a good question. And it's, it's still something that is a newer part of the business for sure, I think for all of us. Wondery has had incredible, not luck, but it's been amazing how many of these you guys have had optioned and turned into things. And I think, for us now, it definitely is a part of our business model. Podcasts, especially these limited run series, don't always do amazingly well, on ad sales, even if a lot of people are listening. And so it's good to sort of think about long tail revenue. So certainly when we are getting pitches now that are for limited run series, we are definitely thinking like, do these have good TV and film potential? What else could they be down the line? And it certainly goes into our decision making. I think that we always will have great audio in mind before anything. And we'd never greenlight something if we thought it was going to be a great, movie, but not a great podcast. So that will always be sort of, the most important priority for us, but it's certainly good, a good revenue stream if we can have these things turned into something else. And honestly, I am having a lot of fun with it. I love TV, I love movies. And it's just been really kind of fun to be a part of that and be along for the ride and, get pitches from like famous directors who you respect and love, and, actors and writers about how they kind of imagine what you've created, as something else. So I'm having fun with it.
That's great. And you mentioned a couple of really important points, which included revenue diversification, and you talked about the short run series, which I think we all know are becoming harder and harder to monetize with a straight ad model, right? So Steve, I want to ask you a little bit more about that. Premium subscriptions, right? I think a couple of years ago, we might have thought, after what happened with Luminary and a few other things in our industry, I'm not sure, I don't know if you guys agree with me, but a couple of years ago, I might have thought we were going to see the end of premium subscriptions. And now, if 2020 was sort of the year of consolidation, where we saw some really major deals, including the Amazon Wondery deal, we're seeing a resurgence and a big one in premium subscriptions with Apple and Spotify. And just in general, I think more of a push for podcasters to recognize that revenue diversification is a key to success. So Steve, I know Qcode signed on as a charter partner for the Apple Premium subscription program. Maybe you guys could talk a little bit about how that came to be and what kind of content you see being a really good or even better fit from the free RSS feed on the premium feed.
Yeah, sure. So at Qcode, we're launching Qcode Plus, which is an opportunity to take fans deeper into the Qcode universe. And, part of our aspirations, I think Jenna talked about this, and as you're speaking, Jenna, I was thinking about how, I'm taking my kids to the Marvel Cinematic Universe right now, introducing them to all the fan characters and fan favorite characters that, came about through comic books, but are now, live in so many places. My son's a huge Spider-Man fan. And we think a lot about that at Qcode, how the next generation of favorite characters might originate from podcasts. We hope that that's the case. At Qcode, we are, originating Qcode Plus to take you deeper into that, the worlds that we're creating, get you a little closer to the characters. And so part of the Qcode Plus subscription is going to offer you things like an uninterrupted listening experience. In fiction in particular, we're fortunate enough to have amazing ad partners, but part of the exciting thing about being immersed in a great world that envelops you is that kind of level of escapism. And so part of Qcode Plus, we're going to offer uninterrupted listening experiences. We're going to offer alternate endings, sessions with the creators around how shows are made, a variety of different things that will just take you deeper into that world. And we do see it as a level of, diversification monetarily. There is a lot of great fiction podcasts that are, supported well through ad revenue, but there are some things that might be shorter, and maybe a single episode or 3 episodes that might lend themselves to be better monetized through a subscription. I think we've seen a lot of people experiment with that to great effect. I was fortunate enough to work with Skip and Zach from 2 Up Productions, creators of Limetown, 36 Questions, and most recently Shipworm. They've done a lot of amazing things and scripted at different lengths of time. And I think that, subscriptions is going to offer a whole new level to a way in which people can think about monetizing that kind of content. But we're new to the game. I know Wondery's been around for a long time doing amazing work around subscriptions. I mean, I'm really personally curious to hear, Jen, your thoughts around subscriptions.
Yeah, I mean, Steve, I agree with what you said. It really opens up great opportunities for the content creators and the listeners, frankly. When advertising is the only model, or IP development, which we know is really, really hard, it's very limiting. It's limiting if you have content that's not brand friendly. It's limiting if you're just going after a niche but really passionate audience. And for a lot of these creators, they may lack the sophistication to go get an ad network and want to start creating that connection with their consumer. And subscriptions are a great way to do that. I don't think it needs to be subscriptions or advertising. It can be an and that's how we've kind of embraced it at Wondery. We launched Wondery Plus as our subscription service, about 9, almost 10 months ago. And it's really been exciting to sort of be able to bring different types of content to our listeners, and also just understand their behaviors more as well. I mean, prior to Amazon, we didn't have, first party data, and we didn't know like exactly what that path was for a listener. And participating in more subscription has given us more insights into really what that listener path is, and how we can serve them better.
Josh, you have any tips for creators as they embark on this process? How are they going to evaluate these kinds of decisions? How will you guide them on that front?
Yeah, I mean, obviously everyone wants their show to reach as many people as possible. So I definitely see creators that are skeptical of any kind of subscription or any kind of paywall or anything that could limit the size of their audience. And I think it's, you're wise to be thoughtful about anything you're going to put behind a paywall. I mean, obviously you don't have to go all or none. You can have premium, like, what we've been talking about, putting premium episodes, additional episodes, longer versions behind a paywall. Getting direct support from your fans is so valuable for a show that has a small but very loyal audience. And in podcasting, there's so many of those. There's so many shows, as referenced earlier, most people listen to 5 podcasts. That doesn't mean that all 5 of those podcasts are massive, right? And if for you, one of the 5 you listen to is like, my podcast about sandwiches that has 100 listeners, for you, that's just as big as The Daily, right? Because that's one of your 5, And so if you can leverage those 100 people or whatever, and they're willing to pay $3 a month, well, then suddenly you're actually making money in the podcast. You're no longer losing money, right? And you have the opportunity to do new things, and we can hire, a great sandwich chef booker to come join our podcast and get us better talent. But and I kid, and obviously on a small level, $300 a month or whatever, right? But there's so many shows that are doing 10,000, 50,000 downloads per episode that on an advertising model wouldn't be able to leverage enough to get huge business changing dollar figures. But if some percentage of those people are willing to pay because they care so much about this thing, that can be very meaningful money for those creators, and that can create a lot of opportunity. And subscriptions is one way to do that. Services like Patreon that allow you to, not just sell premium content, but also special merchandise, special interactions with your audiences are really valuable ways to do that. All of this, we all owe a lot to NPR and APM and PRX and these public radio companies that have been making premium audio for a really long time. And, did that on the basis of people are willing to pay for stuff they care about, even if they don't have to. Soliciting donations for something that is for free on the radio, when you think about it, is like a very bold. There's a lot of faith in humanity to create that business model, right? But but it works. Even now, I mean, if you ask listeners to support your podcast, you will find them willing to do that. One of the ways to do that is with subscriptions, and so I'm very pleased to see more easy ways for people to subscribe. And Apple and Spotify, as 2 of the major platforms people are listening on, to integrate paid subscriptions right in there just makes it so easy and like such a not scary process. You don't have to download another app and put in your credit card or whatever. Both those companies probably already have your credit card number, so why not just click the button and support a show that you're really passionate about?
Yeah, it is going to make it easier for listeners to do that, for sure. And Jenna, you mentioned at the top of the show a little bit about branded podcasts. That's certainly another way for creators, producers, companies to earn additional revenue. Can you tell us just a little bit more about how that works?
Yeah, so we have a lot of brands that come to us that sort of have ideas or parts of ideas and have never been in podcasting, but some of them are, in media, some of them are in other things, and our kind of promise to them is like, we want you to have a podcast that is, at the level of everything else that you do. And sure, you could hire people internally to try to do that, and people have, and then they usually come back to us and say, oh, this is harder than we thought it was going to be. So I think with those brands, we sort of work like a creative agency where we work very closely with them on sort of, what are some of your ideas? Here are some of our ideas. And what we really try to do is sit in for an actual audience, because I think, a lot of brands really want to make great content. And then a lot of brands also want something that works really well internally, and then we help them kind of turn it into something that will work really well externally. I mean, it goes back to what Jen was saying just about how, if you're going to listen to 5 podcasts, one of those has to be kicked out of its spot in order for, someone to listen to something new. So we take that really seriously, and we think, how can we work with this brand to make a podcast that, that people are going to really, really want to listen to? And so we've been doing this from the beginning, and it's a lot of fun. It means that we can work with interesting places that want to own their own content, and we can just sort of, help them turn it into something that they love and are proud of. So we've worked with, we were working with the New York Times before they had an audio department, basically, and creating shows for them, and we get to watch all these cool Netflix shows before they come out, and then figure out what is something that the audience watching those shows would want to hear, and I don't know, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So I think it's like a creative agency with podcasts.
Awesome. So we've talked a lot about this sort of 5-show listener, right? And how challenging it is to get into that roster of 5. So that kind of leads us into a conversation about something that is near and dear to our hearts, but also very challenging for podcasters, which is, of course, discovery. We've all worked on ad swaps, we've worked on feed drops, we've worked on all kinds of different ways to try and get attention for our shows. And it's become really, really difficult, especially for, if you're not Paris Hilton or Barack Obama or some of the big names that Josh has brought into the space, who, bring with them a platform that is already large and established, and they can use that to help build their podcasts. But Jen, you guys are such pros at this at Wondery. Can you give our listeners a couple of tips or things that have worked really well for you guys? Anything that they can do to enhance their followers for podcasts?
Yeah, I mean, I think the good news for creators is there's a misnomer that you have to be a big talent to have a big podcast. And we see that often doesn't translate necessarily, because it's hard to move people between platforms. And if they've never listened to a podcast before, that's a really hard proposition to get them to start listening. So the advice that we give our creators and partners is audio drives audio, and start first with the people who already listen to podcasts. And how do you reach them? Maybe you reach them through, yes, audio swaps and guest swaps and feed drops and press and these different ways and mechanisms you can do to attack the audio audience first, and then kind of go broader from there. It's not to say that you can't ever move audience, but that's the low-hanging fruit. But discovery is the biggest problem for all of us. And I think some of the recent developments with Spotify and Facebook, for example, and some things Twitter is doing, and even with Clubhouse, just getting more people interested and excited in kind of this on-demand audio and appointment audio is going to help. I mean, in my opinion, we're so close. It's about 41% of adults who are now listening in the US, and that number keeps climbing. I really think that in the next 12 months, we're going to see this tip over into mass market, and that's really exciting. But at Wondery, after we've exhausted all of the audio options, we've just been really thinking about what are those other ways to create more entry points for people. And it's everything from more diverse content and diverse voices to just tapping into other platforms, leveraging the content. So part of our motivation on the TV side, besides the monetization piece of turning something into a TV show, which is of course exciting, is just tapping into TV viewers and getting them excited about content, and so excited that then they go check out the podcast, and then they enter the Wondery world, and then we've got them to introduce other things. So I know that that's not at the disposal of every podcast creator, but start with the low-hanging fruit and then kind of go out from there, versus trying to move an entire Twitter audience to audio when they've never checked out a podcast.
Who else wants to weigh in on that? It's such a big topic.
Well, one of the things that I've been really excited about as a development over the last few years has been, different formats in podcast. If you go back 5 years, primary notion with that was that sort of a podcast had to be an episodic, show that was 40 or 50 episodes a year ongoing for a long time. But over the last few years, we've really seen this rise in seasonal experiences. Apple added season and episode tags, they added trailers, and there is this opportunity to make shows that are much more like a TV show and an event and a moment. This, of course, is something that, Wondery and Pineapple Street Media have mastered. These are shows that you really want to tune in the moment, much like how we all get really excited about Game of Thrones or WandaVision. And so I think that that's something I would just call out here too, in terms of discovery and really, I guess it goes back to the earlier conversation about shows that you create, rather than conceiving of a project and trying to focus on, gaining an audience for a show over a long period of time, positioning a show much more as this cinematic event that somebody can get excited about and be that, summer blockbuster podcast like Bunga Bunga or, Missing Richard Simmons is a really exciting thing, I think, to think about as you're crafting audio and then trying to really build that audience around the show and that positioning of it to audiences.
That's great advice. Jen, anything to add about discovery?
I would also add to that, something that I think, so before I was a podcast agent, I was a music agent, and I would get asked all the time by like young rock bands and, various musicians who were trying to sort of break out, right? They'd ask like, what do I do to get discovered? How do I get people to pay attention to my music? And what I would always tell them is look around at your scene, look at the other bands that are in your community that are making music, and think about how you can help them, right? What services can you provide? Are you a great photographer? Like, take portraits for these bands. Are you a great writer? Write about them. Start a blog, or a zine or something. Think about how you can be additive to the people in your scene. And if you lift up others, they'll lift you up. I think same thing is totally true in podcasting. You just have to find your tribe. It doesn't have to be local. It could be other shows from around the world that are thinking about things the same kinds of things that you're thinking about, that have a similar aesthetic, a similar ethos, whatever it is that brings you all together. And, do you have a special skill that you can use to help these other podcasters, do unto others, right? Because you create this virtuistic cycle, right? Where if you're promoting them, then they're promoting you, and you're creating something together, banding and sharing resources. I mean, that could be as formal as creating a podcast collective together. If you think about so many of these companies, from Radiotopia to Maximum Fun to All Things Comedy, starting out with creators coming together to try and promote their work and others as a community. You could start the next great one of those, but it doesn't even have to be that formal. I mean, just getting yourself out there and getting to know other people who are in your position and offering to help them how you can, talking them up, and just being part of that community is so valuable. It's so valuable on a grassroots level when you're trying to build something.
That's incredible advice. Awesome. And you mentioned collaborating with like-minded podcasters. I think the new Apple Channels feature is going to give us a huge opportunity to do that. And if our listeners haven't seen or read about that, I encourage you to do so. I think it's with the new, Steve, maybe you even know, 14.05 version of iOS, where we're going to have channels available to us where we can, ourselves curate collections of podcasts, right? Something like that. So.
Yeah, exactly. So that you can start to see some of the stuff rolling out in iOS 14.5 and forward. But yes, as part of Apple's new developments, you can, separate from the subscriptions, you can start to group shows and channels, and you can do those, sort of within your company or network. You could make multiple channels based on maybe verticals, or you could, offer that at a network level. And I have heard people, I love the spirit of, sort of a rising tide raises all ships is one of my favorite sayings, Josh, that you really expressed there. And I've heard of folks wanting to group with other shows where they might have been independent before to start to build a channel or build a subscription with others, because it's really additive for them and the rest of the community, especially in a particular vertical. Like if you're in kids podcasts, for example, or you're in fashion and lifestyle, I think there's so much opportunity to team up, as you really eloquently expressed there, Josh.
No, it's great. And one of the things that we always do for our hosts is we work to get transcripts of their episodes, published on like-minded websites, Scientific American, Psychology Today for some of our verticals. And that works really well. So I'm so glad you brought that up, because I think it's a great collection of tips for podcasters just starting out, in particular, to find those resources and ways to share their great work. So that's cool. I want to segue into something that isn't talked about on these panels very often, which is distributors. I always like to say to the people on our podcast team that we don't want to just reach out to Spotify, to Apple, to Stitcher to ask for something. We want to be a great partner. We want to offer to beta test new features. We just want to help. We want it to be a two-sided, relationship. So I'd love for you guys to give our attendees a little bit of your insights in terms of how they can best work with, when they submit a promotion to Apple or to Spotify or to Stitcher, how can they work with the distributors to try and get the best possible experience for their shows? Steve, do you want to start with that one for obvious reasons?
Yeah, sure. As mentioned, I spent a long time at Apple. I'm no longer there. And so I just do want to caveat, I'm not speaking on their behalf, but, when I think about podcast platforms or any platform really, and their partnership with the content publisher, what I really think a lot about is what is that mutual goal that they share in common? And of course, it's to make that show successful on their platform, right? If you are growing an audience together around that particular show, then that's what they want to do with you. So the more that you can really position yourself, talking about the exciting work that you are doing, as Josh talked a lot about earlier in the pitching conversation, much of that applies to the platforms as well. So talk about the amazing show that you're putting together, how you're reaching a really exciting audience, how you're already underway in that mission of reaching people on their platform. And then really what you're doing is encouraging them to jump on board with you and get them so excited that they want to be a part of your team. So, as you talked about there, Kathy, like how is it that you're adding value to the listeners of your show on their platform, and, some really strategic, but then also tactical ways? Are you driving traffic to, listen on their platform, providing that link in your own social media marketing and your own press and PR outlets, and doing, otherwise very creative things to try and create a moment around your show? Let them know about that, because they want to see the most invested and creative creators really rise on their platform, because of course they are trying to differentiate themselves from each other. So that kind of leaves me one other thought real quick, which is, follow the platforms in terms of what they're doing. What kind of new features are they talking about or investing in themselves? They're doing that for a reason. And if you can certainly be sure to be investing in those tools and features, or ways to even package and present your show, like Apple has hosts and guests on their platform. If you sort of invest in those things, then you're helping them on their mission to really build their own platform as well. So I really like how you put it, Kathy. It's about being a good partner to them as much as you're also looking for value from them in exchange.
One thing too that we have done pretty successfully over the years is to look at other parts of the distributor's ecosystem and find other assets and resources that can accompany the podcast that do really well. So whether it's music, a playlist that might accompany a podcast, I'm sure you guys have done that too. An author recommends, if it's a book tie-in, or in our case, we've done a couple of map guides for things that represented a road trip or an experience that could be taken out onto the road, particularly for the summer, right? Summer road trips are a great way to enhance a podcast if it's relevant. So I don't know what other ideas you guys have for things, relationships you've had with distributors, but love to hear them. Anybody have anything else?
I mean, I think Steve hit on most of the tactics, but I'm still surprised how many creators I talk to who will say something like, "How did you get promotion for this show?"
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, we pitched it to Apple or Spotify," and they're like, "Oh, you pitched it," and it's like, yeah, we pitched it. So I mean, don't forget that part, like cultivate that relationship and pitch and do all the things that Steve said, but don't forget that piece of the puzzle. I guess when we think about any marketing campaign or any show launch, communicating with our platform partners is like the very first thing that we think about in terms of that marketing strategy. And we do it early. And like Steve said, you find those connection points and how you can be a good partner on this particular show, but just don't leave that for the end and don't leave that out completely. I've also been surprised how last minute some of our partners will come to the table and they're not realizing that these platforms are getting pitched weeks and months in advance and they're locking their promotional calendar. So you can't come to them the day before unless it's something really just time sensitive that they're going to get excited about and expect, promotion. So that goes into being a good partner, but just work that into your cycles early on as possible.
That sounds great. Jenna, we talked a little bit before too about the fact that there's more jobs in the podcast industry than I think people realize, right? Podcasting is hard, and we've talked about the creator, we've talked about the producer, but share with us some ideas, if you will, for people listening today. What are the other ways they could get involved in this industry that might not be so obvious?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. I mean, it's just like a great, thriving, booming industry right now. And there are so many jobs in it. I mean, I remember like when I was getting into it, I guess like 15 years ago, I was totally freaked out because I was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to be a public radio producer. I'll never have any money, but like I'll be doing a thing that I love. And now there are just a lot of opportunities, and things that even pay well. So I think, a lot of people sort of want to get into podcasting because they want to be podcast hosts. Almost everyone that I talk to, actually. And at Pineapple, like at my company, we're specifically looking for people who don't say that they want to be a podcast host when we're hiring, because I think that, I mean, there's like the main job that we are hiring for is a producer job. And so you're kind of the person it's kind of like being a movie director. Like you're really making the thing happen, and you are a big part of the artistic vision of it, and you're guiding, a host writer through it. There are editor jobs, which are really cool and really different than anyone thinks they're going to be. You're like deep in the scripts and in the tape. There are the business side jobs, growing revenue streams. There are the systems jobs, like operations. There are the sound jobs, the engineer jobs. There are all sorts of kind of exciting new jobs in podcasting. And mostly what I just want people to know is like, if podcasting is a thing that you've been thinking of going into, but are worried that there won't be a lot of opportunities, or that it will be really hard to break into, there's just so much cool, exciting stuff going on. And I would say also, try to just teach yourself some stuff. Just try to play around with a microphone. And I mean, I used to just like take music files and mix them with like myself talking, just to like experiment. And that's sort of how you figure out how to do this thing. Yeah.
That's awesome. There's a lot of great classes out there too now, right? That are available, do some research. And Jen, you guys are hiring anything interesting that people might want to be aware of, jobs that are sort of outside the box?
We have, too many to list. I would say just check out our website. They're all posting there, but we are hiring in all different departments. And some require audio experience. Some positions don't require it at all. So there's really, like Jenna said, a lot of ways to get involved in this industry.
Great. So we've got about 4 minutes left. So that's 1 minute for each of you to tell us about a great show you're listening to currently that perhaps is not one of your own. Josh, why don't we start with you?
I'm going to cheat a little bit and mention one that's a little bit my own, but it's so good. The Midnight Miracle, hosted by Dave Chappelle, among other incredible hosts, produced by Salt Audio, and being released through Luminary. You may have read about this show and you think you know what it is, but you don't know what it is. It is really a game-changing show. It is not a normal comedian talk show or something. It is beautiful. It's immersive. It has incredible sound design. It's moving. You will laugh. You will cry. I'm telling you, this is a really incredible show. The first episode is out and available on all listening platforms, and I strongly encourage everyone to check it out.
Great. Steve?
Well, I'm going to go a little bit different than what Qcode does. One of my favorite shows recently has been a show called All Fantasy Everything, which is put out by HeadGum. This is a show led by Ian Carmel, who's a writer for James Corden, and it's a bit of a comedic roundtable show where friends get together. They pick a completely random topic, one that you like to debate with friends, like favorite desserts or best Christmas movie, and they go around and they have a lot of fun fantasy drafting their favorite picks within that genre. It's hilarious, and one of my favorite things about it is you really get a look into the creative and comedic mind of some really brilliant writers, because you can, as much as they're having fun in the moment, you can see them sort of workshopping and writing bits as you actually listen to the show. So it's a really fun, and it's a long listen too. It's usually about an hour and a half or 2 hours. So definitely fits into the one of the frequent 5 shows for me. But it's a great one to listen to.
Fantastic. Jen?
Yeah, so one of the shows I'm listening to, this was actually a recommendation from my husband, and normally it goes the other way, as you can imagine. I started listening to Prof G, which is Scott Galloway's podcast, about 4 or 5 months ago, and I like it better than I expected. I mean, obviously he's really opinionated and has his style of, delivering information. He's had a lot of interesting guests, and I always find something out of each episode that pertains to like my life, but also like work. And so it's a great mix of both. So and that's Vox that puts that out.
Yeah, it's a great show. Jenna, how about you?
I just flew through this show called The Line. Apple is doing original podcasts, which is really exciting. So not only are they launching this new subscription service, but they are doing lots of originals, which I'm very excited about. It's the show called The Line, hosted by Dan Taberski. We didn't make this show, but we did make Dan's 3 previous shows and his next show, and I recommend listening to all of them. It's about Eddie Gallagher, the Navy SEAL who was accused of war crimes, and it was the first podcast in a while where I would like wake up early on Tuesday mornings to listen. And it's all now out in the world, 6 episodes, really fascinating. They break crazy new information and a quick and awesome listen.
Those are great recommendations. Thank you guys so much. The insights I think you've shared with our attendees today have been absolutely first class, and I know will be really appreciated in the weeks to come. So thank you so much for joining us. Enjoy the rest of the conference, and thanks again to Digital Hollywood. Have a good afternoon. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.